All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Future of Church, where we are living at the intersection of faith, tech, and culture, all those fun things. I am Christopher.
And I'm Joe.
Oh, look at that. Look at
And
that.
I really like how you can tell that our intro isn't scripted because you say it differently every time.
Every time.
It's
I
very
know.
organic.
I would say it's intentional, but I'd be lying because it's not. I think it's close-ish. I
close.
think.
Yeah.
Close.
I mean, for not having a script, you haven't really gone off script. So
It's true. Yeah. It's not like I've said things like, I don't know, something completely wacky, which maybe I will one of these times.
yeah,
Just for
you
entertainment
haven't just
value.
completely changed the topic of the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
They were talking about ducks and other waterfowl.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared.
Which funny story, and then we'll transition to the topic. I have a good friend who has joked about the fact, he's like, I feel like I could get you on a podcast and talk about just about anything. And I was like, probably. And he's joked that at some point he wants to surprise me with a just completely unexpected topic and just see where we go with it. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, our topic, though, we talked about it. We hinted at it a little bit at the end of last week's episode, where we started talking about where some of this technology is going and how, in many cases, it has the risk of running into exploitative practices. And what does it really mean as we start thinking about the impacts and the ethics of this and what it means for the haves and the have-nots and where it goes. And so I actually last week on my podcast was talking about a recent rise in attention on data worker exploitation and what is kind of being brought into the surface that is actually pretty much under the radar. You actually have to look for it because it's not, you won't find it on kind of the main news streams on this because it's kind of ugly when you start digging into it. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the underbelly of how people are being exploited to build these advanced technologies that we use and how we as Christians should care about that. We shouldn't just be like, oh. And I think in many regards, some people probably don't know. So yeah, just kind of curious, Joe, kind of your reactions, because we talked backstage a little bit about that. But yeah, any thoughts initially?
Yeah, one, I know you've mentioned just privately to me a couple times about these data workers and what they're exposed to and the conditions. And it's something that I think once you know about it, it's hard not to think about it when you're working at stuff, but it's just a huge distraction, from that is the actual output of that work. Like you see the work and it seems so smooth and effortless and it's so accessible that even if you were just thinking about it 5 minutes ago, you're so caught up in the output that it's really easy to forget that all this went into it. And again, it's not unique to the area of tech where we forget all the people involved along the way. But it's a different type of exploitation than I think we've talked about in kind of the social sphere. And so opportunities to make that happen is good. And then the other reaction is just the idea of how clear Scripture is about how to treat people and workers in general. Like, when we started our conversation, I did a quick search to, just low-hanging fruit. And, in Malachi, I will come to you in judgment, bearing witness against, and there's a list, and one of them is against those who oppress the hired worker. And, and that can be mistreatment. There's another one that talks about withholding wages. And a lot of
exploiting employees. The Bible has a lot to say on that.
Yeah.
It's not just like, well, that's kind of a gray area. Like,
right.
No, it's not.
Yeah. People should get paid for the work that they do.
And paid fairly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the other thing. And to me, this isn't new. It's not like a new topic. I mean, good grief, just look back over human history. This is the way the world has tragically operated, in many ways. But I think to your point with the tech, most people don't realize it. Some just may not even have an awareness. I mean, I was catching up with somebody on Friday and I just finished recording it. And so I had said, this is on my mind. what do you mean? Like, what exactly is that? And I described how, just gave her even the example, the Facebook example I have of, fact checkers who, I get it's people get really charged about things being fact checked, but AI catches things. And then at some point, somebody's got to look at it and evaluate, did the AI catch the right thing? Did it catch the wrong thing? And while we might think, and get charged about, well, oh, it's, political this or political that, there's the underbelly of society. And I have some friends over there who are like, it is traumatic, the kind of content people are exposed to, the kinds of things that people put on the internet. And, you think the same thing with AI as you're training these massive large language models. It's ingesting all the content on the internet. Literally, I was reading an article the other day, like by the end of, I think this year or mid next year, it will have literally consumed everything that we've ever created in human history, which is mind boggling.
Right.
But like anything, somebody's got to go, wait, is this good information to train the model on? Or is this information we don't want to train the model on?
Yeah.
Which also means you have to look at some pretty horrific stuff and go, yeah, no, like that's not appropriate. Yeah. That's not stuff we want in here. Or as they're testing the models and it's kicking stuff out, going, whoa, that's not cool stuff. And there's kind of this idea that, oh, they're tech workers, so they make 300 grand a year and they're in Silicon Valley and they're, whatever. And there's some that are that, but even in talking to my friends over at Facebook, I'm like, these people are in therapy. They have PTSD from some of this stuff. And that's in like idealistic conditions. It's extremely traumatic. Yeah. You look into some of these practices and you look at some of these stories. I tell people all the time, I'm like, go check out data-workers.org and look at some of these stories of people in third world countries where companies are looking to do this as cheap as humanly possible. And it's like, well, let's get these, people who don't have access to a lot of opportunity, and we'll pay them next to nothing. And it's all good for us. We'll make billions of dollars off of this stuff on the backs of people who we can completely exploit. And it's sickening. It really, truly is sickening.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and the half-formed thought I have around this is just even the, generally mixed, even in like professional world where you're still paying, for like offshore support for stuff. We know that, we have an organization we work with pretty consistently. They have lower rates, they're based in a different country, and that's part of the reason why. Yep. And even when that happens, I'm like, okay, we're paying a fair wage to their local standard, but if they weren't available, how much would we have been willing to pay for it elsewhere and for here? And is that even in and of itself exploitative? And I think that's kind of a rhetorical question at that level. But then when you go all the way down to, we're finding essentially unskilled labor paying, less than a quarter of our minimum wage, if that, to get really what amounts to temporary and traumatic work, done, so that ultimately we don't need them anymore, and we can even dump that off of our ledger.
Right.
It's finding the least fortunate and the least privileged and offering them a temporary financial reprieve in exchange for, as you said, and I haven't gone there to look at anything myself, but for enduring things that we just don't want to endure ourselves, or have people we know endure ourselves, or,
Yeah, because we know the negative impact, or that, like, a lot of this stuff is like, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy, because you'd be like, well, gosh, no, that's terrible. Oh, but these people over here, they're willing to do it. And I can pat myself on the back and go, yeah, but I mean, look at their conditions.
Yeah.
I'm giving them a job. And you're like,
Right.
well, I
Yeah.
don't know that you can go to sleep well at night with that.
Right. Yeah. And, and talking about kind of the temporary nature of things, the other one that I had seen recently that's not on the same scale, but this idea of, and I don't know where these are being deployed right now, but a story about, robots that are stocking shelves. And right now they're stocking shelves using, $2 an hour labor from across the world. And so not only is that a real example, not a made up one, of, work being outsourced from people who could be doing it here for a fair living, a fair wage where they can do whatever, they're taking like, no, we're not going to spend that much. We're going to invest over here. And in the meantime, part of what's happening is kind of harvesting that activity for, teaching an AI model that then can run the robot and do the work. So even that person is out of work.
Right. And I think the challenge with this is on this one in particular, because even some of the recent companies I've engaged with and just some other things, like there are real things happening where jobs are changing and people are losing their jobs to AI. It's a real deal. Right. It's actually happening. And yes, in many ways, people are being used for their data to train the AI models to help ultimately eliminate their jobs. And I think in some ways that is the challenge of progress. In some ways, I understand that's a challenge. Like, hey, we made machines and machines made farming easier and we didn't need as many farmers. And like, I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that happens. But what I see and where I really see the breakdown is there's almost zero effort from the organizations or the institutions going into how do we set these people up to be successful in the future? Like we know this is what we're doing for them now, and it's for a purpose. So one, let's make sure they're aware instead of hiding it, type of a thing. And then let's also make the investment in their human beings.
Yeah.
Like, so let's invest in their ongoing development, their skills, and what jobs will they need to do once the robots know how to stock the shelves? Well, there will be new jobs for them to do. So are we doing what we can to prepare them, give them the skills, give them the knowledge, create working conditions? Because there's a world where I totally am fine with saying, hey, like, let's bring people in. Some of these things need to get done, but let's treat them like human beings, not a piece of garbage to just be used, exploited, and then tossed in the trash. And I think that's the unfortunate part.
Right.
That is kind of the norm right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're not, in that either example, whether you're just staring at and evaluating imagery and inputs, or remote stocking shelves to train a model, like you're not being given useful marketable skills for the future. And those people who would have had those jobs aren't gaining that practical sort of experience that can build them towards whatever it is in their future. So what are we doing? Like you said, what are we doing in that space instead? Because even thinking about farming, one of the things that sticks out to me about that is, part of it is like, I haven't done a specific study, but I've seen like images of like how like even tractor sizes have changed like over the years, and like how expensive that stuff is to have that to farm at scale. So your equipment is huge and it makes you more efficient, but it's also more expensive, which means you have to,
there's more financial risk.
Yeah. It's the Ouroboros that, eats its own tail. And so we have fewer people doing more work with more and more expensive equipment that then needs to be maintained and whatever. And if it breaks down, screwed. And as that happens, as we gain other skills, so I get to do things that my aunt, people before me, generations before, never knew how to or had an opportunity to do that are super cool. On the other hand, I don't know how to farm.
Yeah.
Like, if I had to go to the grocery store and they're out of carrots, guess what? I don't have.
I'm not eating carrots.
I don't have carrots because I don't have a garden or seeds or a will to plant and and harvest. Like,
Yeah.
like when I'm around people who are a lot more, like doomsday end times, mentality people, like, man, if that happens, I'm so hosed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, I think about the fact that one, I get there's not a lot of awareness. And so I think some of this is just going, hey, like for people, you may not know this is a regular, this is the norm. The tragic part is this is the norm in data workers right now. It's not like, oh, there's a handful of exceptions to this. It's like, no, this is kind of what all the big tech companies are doing, because even like the tractor example, it's like these AI models require so much stuff that they're just like, well, where do we find people who are honestly willing to subject themselves to this stuff? Like the two jobs we just described. Like, hey, would you like to sign up and stare at obscene, horrific content that will traumatize you cognitively 8 hours a day? Most people who have an option would go, yeah, no, that's not going to be for me. Or, hey, would you like to come in and just sit and control a robot all day long, just stacking cans on the thing? Yeah, no, don't sign me up for that job. And so there's a need. And because, hey, we got to do it with as little resources as possible, well, these companies are going and exploiting the living snot out of the vulnerable. And we know from I have Isaiah 1:17 on my mind, where it's just like, correct oppression, seek justice, bring justice to the fatherless. Like, we need to care about it. Because if we don't and just go, well, that's not my problem, that's kind of big tech. It's like, well, but you're using it. Yeah. So in some ways you're contributing to it. And I get that puts us in this really precarious position of like, so what do you want me to do? Just like quit using AI or like what? And I don't know about you, but like, I don't have a clear answer for everybody's response to it, where it's like, well, what you all should do is X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But I think about the diversity of the body of Christ, and we all are uniquely positioned with different relationships, different capabilities, different things. I'm like, we got to care about it and do something.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I end up feeling like personal heart level struggle when it comes to things like this, where it's like, okay, I know something needs to be done.
Now I know.
But I don't know what to do. And it's the place where and this could be relevant. Maybe something. But I think that one of the things I've learned that I haven't leaned into enough, and it's something that Beck and I talk about periodically, but this idea that, okay, not everyone has to be an expert in how to care for the poor and the marginalized. No. But if you have a heart for it, there's people who do. And they're working all over the place. You just got to find them and say, what can I do? Because I guarantee they have ideas. And so this is another one where there's probably, you mentioned a website.
Yeah, like data-workers.org. Like they have a whole group of people that are committed to creating awareness and driving change for regulation around how do we make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And so maybe you go there first and you go, okay, I care. Here's a resource. This is where I can learn how to do something,
Yeah. No, because I think that's, because I think sometimes it can feel really impossible. And even like, I think about the work we do. Mm-hmm. And I spend a lot of time working with companies on skill work on like, hey, how do you think about this? Because there's a lot of times where it's like, I could see a business owner who's an IT person who goes, well, we're building this. I don't know what else to do. Like, these are my options. So what do I do with these employees? Because eventually I'm not going to need them to train the robots anymore.
Yeah.
what do you want me to just like keep them around and pay? I can't, this isn't a charity. I can't just pay. It's like, well, no. So start thinking about what kind of jobs you might need and what kind of skills might you need to be successful in that. And yeah, you know what? You might need to invest in their development. And that might be a step. I think about a lot of business owners and business leaders where one of my biggest pushes to them is, are you investing in the skills of your talent? Because if you're not, it's not just data workers, it's just employees in general where, I mean, I think of the Intuit thing recently. They laid off 10% of the workforce and they literally said, well, their skills weren't relevant to the jobs that we were doing. And to me, I go, you failed them then because you knew you were planning this change. And did that 10% of people have an opportunity to go, hey, here's where we're going?
Yeah.
You can get off the bus. That's up to you. Or here's what we're building towards. And we want to help potentially create a bridge for you to go from here to here. And are you doing everything you can with that? And I would say a lot of organizations don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real opportunity. And this just happens to be a category of workers that it's easy to kind of overlook and go, yeah, well, I mean, we'll do that for our high potentials or we'll do that for our managers. But like, oh, the data workers, nah, we're paying them 50 cents an hour to do this just degrading work. They don't really add any real value to the organization. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Yeah. Especially when without them, what product would you have?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's something I struggle with. You mentioning potential and high potential. It's like, okay, these are our non-disposable people. Is so how that comes across.
It does.
Like these are the people that, we think they have the ability to be the next leaders. And because of that, we're going to invest in them because everyone else, they're fine.
Well, and I don't remember. And again, this is one of those mindset shifts that I think people need to make. And I just think I can't remember the exact verse where it talks about all the different parts of the body of Christ.
Right.
But I think sometimes it's easy to get limited into that as we think about like, oh, in ministry, instead of thinking about it more broadly and going, no, this is like how we operate as humanity, where it's like we all have unique skills and talents. And there's not like, if you do that, that's like garbage. You aren't really valuable to the organization if you're doing this. If you're doing this, we care about you. And it's like, whoa, no. Because to your point, if you didn't have these data workers, all this advanced tech that we have wouldn't exist. Or if we did, it would be even more of a dumpster fire than it is today, because it's on their hard work of going, no, we can't have AI models using this in its calculations of what a good response is.
Right. Well, and just like, even thinking about like for concepts that maybe are more immediately relatable, like I know some people who do facilities work at our company, and one of them was saying he was trying to get a promotion and what grade that promotion would have been at, and I was like, that work seems pretty important, for only being graded, I think it was grade 8 or something. I'm like, because I had been wondering for a while, like, where are, like, because everyone I know is like a grade 14 and above. And I'm like, where are grade 7? Like, does that actually exist at this company? Whatever. And I'm, find out it's the people who are keeping our buildings running. Are we considering that unskilled labor? Like, what? How is that the way we value the people who literally make sure our buildings function? Well,
and I think the unfortunate part about, you even brought it up of like offshoring, or I've been in lots of like board meeting conversations where, this gets discussed, and there's been kind of this movement that it's like, well, everybody should make, whatever amount of money. And it's almost like there's this like balancing act that organizations have to walk. And I get it. I get different roles pay different based on different responsibility, the risk associated with it, the amount of how hard it is to replace. And so I don't think the complexity of that is always taken into consideration when these debates happen, where it's like, well, sure, yeah, in a nirvana world, we'll all make more money than we know what to do with it. It'll be wonderful. And when it's like, well, yeah, okay, well, let's wait till the new creation and then we'll see what that looks like. But for now, that's not where we are. But I think what gets me up in arms is when it's like, hey, can we at least agree that every single human being who works deserves a fair wage and safe working environments? Which I don't think that's unreasonable to go, look, I get there's going to be differences in pay and we can sit and debate what those differences should be. And like, I get all that, but like, can we just make sure that at least nobody falls below the line? Like that. Yeah. You like that? That's my, that's my apple. But like, and that's the part where I feel like sometimes it turns into this debate about, well, how big should the differences be between, and it's like, can we just agree that there should be a floor? And nobody should be under the floor.
No. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And and again, understanding all those business considerations, because I know how hard it is to find replacements in my world at this point. But yeah, like you said, like providing at least a base level of dignity for people. Like I was looking at, someone had posted, and I hadn't thought about it through this specific lens, but like a McDonald's, like this is how much they made in a whole year working full time. Like you're working full time somewhere, and the math checked out, and it's like nothing. And I'm like, okay, I remember kind of doing that when I was in college, kind of making that hourly rate and being like, hey, this works out. But it's also when we were splitting rent 4 or 5 ways, utilities, and we had, food was paid for via school and the loans that were associated with that. And it's like, that was a very specialized set of circumstances. That resulted in that being okay and us feeling all right and, eating way too many snacks. But it's like outside of that context, you're like, oh, wait.
Raising a family on this?
Yeah, what are we actually doing here? And then I started looking at the poverty lines, and I'm like, these poverty lines seem a little bit low. I would think someone could be considered in need a little bit higher than
bit higher.
And I think that put things in a little bit different perspective for me, because I'm even one of the people you would have seen on Facebook when people talk about livable wage saying, what do you mean by a livable wage? Like, what does that entail? Because that could mean different things to different people. It's different based on which state you live in, which country in the world, as we've already discussed. But like you said, at a baseline, like the numbers don't, thinking about it in that context, the numbers you look at and you're like, oh, wow, that really doesn't do anything for anybody.
Correct. And I think, and this goes back to organizations needing to think more broadly, I think, about what that means, because I totally understand there's certain jobs where it's like, hey, this is not designed to be a job that you take care of your family. Like, we created this job for teenagers in the summer to whatever. We were never planning on somebody making a career out of this. But a lot of times it's like, but are you doing everything you can to help, one, make that crystal clear, and two, helping set somebody up for success to move on to other things? Because I think sometimes people end up in these jobs because they're like, well, what else am I going to do? Like, what are my other options? And it's like, well, are you doing things to help bring out greater talents in them, teach them higher level skills, help grow them so that it's like, you know what, maybe this is where it starts. But that's a temporary thing to get you through this season. And our plan is to get you here. And I think it's when you get into the exploitative practices of, I mean, it is pretty convenient that, we
Yeah.
only got to pay them this long and they seem happy staying there. So let's just maybe like not
Right.
tip that boat.
Well, yeah, not taking a look at it proactively through that lens to say,
Right.
okay, times have changed, and if we're taking away from the people who live next door to us to give to someone far away, which isn't always a bad thing, that's good for the person who's far away. But then what are you doing for your literal neighbor to help make sure that we're not causing other situations through neglect? And so, yeah, like, investing in job training, like, hey, we're not just going to dump you into an unemployment line, but we're going to help, whatever that is. And even while you're here, if you're willing to be an agent in it, here's opportunities for you to develop skills. Because I do think that's one thing. And I don't think you were even attempting to imply it, but in terms of like, not preparing your people, like you can have the greatest preparation program for skills and whatever in the world.
I was just going to go there.
Engage, that's on them. So you can't just be like, people aren't prepared, and that's only the fault of the people who are meant to prepare them.
And I think that's right before you said it, I was like, that was the second caveat that I was going to bring up, that you said that I see from the business side of things, because I'm in a lot of these business discussions where it's like, but people seem to want to just be complacent. And even when we give them opportunities, they're like, nah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That is a legitimate frustration. And I think to the employee base, you kind of have to say, hey, you also have to take on those opportunities. Right. And you can't just go, well, I just want to stay exactly where I am, and I just expect you to make this up for me. Because like, well, no, we got to be in it together. And if you're not, you're going to get, unfortunately, the odds are not in your favor on the employee side. That's, I think, the harder part.
And if you're not, and if you don't have people engaging with the program, whatever that is, the opportunity, that doesn't give you an excuse to stop offering it either.
Right.
Like, that's one of those things, like, okay, but is it the right thing to do? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that means you find a different way to do it.
Yeah, maybe something's wrong with what you're doing.
Yeah, and get involved, but then also accept that, okay, not everyone's going to do it, but it doesn't mean you stop offering.
Right.
Which that comes around to the church a lot, is like, oh, we tried this and it wasn't successful. Well, how long did you try it for?
Yeah. And what exactly did you try?
Do? Like, even if you only get 2 people who engage with your discipleship program, is that not still the right thing to do?
Right.
Have such a program? And there's a guy who goes to our church who works, does programming for a radio studio, and broadcaster is what I was looking for. And he brought up a formula that they use for how many times you have to say something to an audience of a particular size before they'll recognize that they even heard it once. Yeah. And he's like, and so we just did some real rough numbers based on our own congregation. He says, yeah, so pretty much if you want people to know something, you have to say it every week for a whole year. Right. Before you can even have any confidence that the people in your audience heard it, will themselves recognize that they heard it once, which I also think is an interesting position on it. Is it's about them recognizing that they've heard it once, because we tend to take as communicators the notion of, well, we did tell them, they were there when we said it, so why don't they get it? And it's like, well, right, but you only said it once. Or you said it once a week for 3 weeks, which means you didn't get everyone. People who heard it forgot it, whatever. Until you've really done it for that period of time, you can't say that you did it. So, when you're setting up a program like this, I guess is where my point's coming back around to.
You can't go, I sent the email to everybody and nobody signed up.
Yeah. And even here, I've mentioned more than once, because I don't know why, I have a brain that's kind of sensitive to it. Like the number of times we repeat things here, like it's not necessarily bad that we repeat it. I may say, hey, we've repeated a lot, but there might be people going, did you? Have you?
Did you? I've listened to every episode and I didn't hear it once. And it's like, yeah, I know. And I think that can sometimes be a hard part about being the communicator of things is you're like, well, I just don't want to say it again. People have heard it. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've understood it. And I think, the other thing that, as you were saying that came up for me is also just this being creative with how we think about what support looks like. Because going back to the data worker exploitation thing, I think sometimes we're often overly focused on the financial side. Not that the financial side's not important, but that it's very much like, well, if we just get the wage right, if we just pay people enough. And it's like, well, not necessarily, because again, like in this instance, the people I know at Facebook, one of the biggest things they invest in is the mental health support for it. And, those kinds of things where you're like, yeah, but what really do people need to make this job not like above the line, like we were talking about before? Like, let's make sure nobody's under the floor. And yeah, maybe wage is part of that, but it's also bigger than that. And we can't just go, well, we pay people enough money, so the fact that they're developing mental health conditions as a result of this, I guess that's just part of the job. It's like, whoa. No. Or, again, a lot of these are overseas, conditions are terrible. And it's like, really? Like, we can't make sure that there's decent working conditions for this kind of stuff too. And I think that's where there's just so much opportunity to care about this and say, hey, and honestly, if we draw more attention to this, I think everybody benefits from it, because this is, to me, a clear example of exploitation that we go, hey, this isn't cool. So why don't we fix this? And I'm sure there's other things along the way that we can improve as we're doing it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and I think, to your earlier point about, so what do we do? Mm-hmm. I think it is about figuring out, if somebody hears it and goes, oh, I didn't know this, I feel like maybe I should do something. Well, I think that's where you got to work with the Holy Spirit to go, so God, what do you want me to do about it? Bring it up with my church. Should we have some sort of ministry for it? Should we, I don't know. Like, well, I don't have answers to that. And I wish I did. I don't know for you being more involved in kind of the traditional church institution. I don't even know what kind of, like, what would you do, leader of the elder board? Somebody came up and goes, I heard this episode you were on. I actually care really deeply about it.
Yeah.
What can we do as a church?
I would say, I don't know, but I'm looking into it. Yeah. And I think this is, I brought it up so I wouldn't forget it later. But yeah, the dataworkers.org. I mean, I think this can be used flippantly in many ways. But I mean, as Christians who believe that we have the ear of our divine creator, savior of the universe, great advocate for man, is pray. I mean, that's a good start. Even if it's like praying for the Lord to stir something more in our hearts.
I love that.
To give us wisdom, to give us discernment in what we're looking at. Because even like thinking about, am I about to post something or respond to something or, share something that is going to put something in somebody else's queue that they shouldn't have to look at?
Yeah.
Like how does some of my behavior interact with that? And even if someone who posted something that end up having to go through that, you're like, dude, that by doing that, you subjected not just the people in your audience, but like somewhat, to that material. And was that helpful? Was it useful? But even, I don't know what else here, but, from this, this data workers inquiry thing, maybe, from there you can get somewhere practical if something specific does stir in your heart. And maybe it starts with the idea of data workers, but ends up feeling like too intangible. You can't find someone to work with. Like we've said a couple times here today, it's not just them.
No, it's not.
It's all over the place.
It's happening everywhere.
Anyone, there's a lot of exploited people around the world in a variety of ways. And so maybe this isn't the one that rings in your heart. Hopefully it's ringing, and it's obviously ringing in the hearts of some people. But where can you find that? I hate to just call it an outlet because it makes it just feel like nothing more than a release valve, but an outlet for that kind of ministry to say, how do I care for people who are exploited, disenfranchised, whatever. And I think it does start with prayer, especially if you don't know what.
Right.
And talk to other people. Maybe you bump into someone who's like, you talk to me and I'm like, yeah, I'm just processing for the first time now. And then you talk to someone else like, yeah, this has been on my heart for a couple of years. This is where it's led me. And now you're starting to build that little community of people who are concerned, and you can start building into that. So, those would be a couple of things is, what can you do versus even just what the church is doing? Because I think that's another one where we can get stuck in a trap of, you come to the elder chair, you come to a pastor, say, what can we do as a church? And they say, we're not sure. And we're not sure how the Spirit's moving in our body in that sort of way yet. And a lot of times people just take that and they just stop.
Yeah, they just go back home and go, well, I guess there's nothing for me to do.
Yeah, I guess we're not doing that ministry here. Or we say, hey, we could do a ministry, but we only have this many staff members and they only have this many hours in the week and they're packed. Yeah. If something's going to happen here, we're going to need some help driving it. If it's on your heart, let's partner. Go talk to people, get something going, and then tell a pastor, hey, we've got a group who wants to do something. This is what we want to do. Can we talk about it? Can we advertise it? Can we invite more people in? Do we, whatever that is, and start doing the work yourself. The goal of church leadership in Ephesians 4 is to work themselves out of a job. And as we were just talking about, that doesn't work unless the people start working themselves,
take responsibility,
in a position where they don't need.
Well, and I love a couple things that rung with that I really liked was, one, even things as simple as just being so mindful. And we've talked about it a lot, being so mindful of what you post, being so mindful of how you use the tech. Because at the end of the day, it's the consumer that drives what the companies do.
Yeah.
Like if we demand this from products, well, what do you think the companies are going to do? Well, they're going to find the best, fastest, cheapest way to do that thing. And so if we keep creating more content and sharing content that is causing this kind of stuff, well, then you're actually creating the garbage that is actually going straight over to those folks. And if we demand products that need to be filtered all the time because we're asking it to do things that we shouldn't be asking it to do, well, then the companies are going to have to find ways to govern and manage all that, which is just creating more trash for them to sort through. But I also, I love the fact of figuring out, and again, the prayer piece is huge because I don't know, you might listen to it and go, I don't even really know what to do, but God will give you the wisdom to figure it out. And I think we're all uniquely gifted in different ways, and we all have different opportunities that God can create. I just even think of myself, for me, it was what do I do about this? And then it was well, maybe I can advise more on ethical practices in how AI is developed. And I have those opportunities because I'm in those meetings and I can say, hey, this isn't okay. What are we doing about this? And have a voice. Or I know there's some work I'm doing with upskilling people from other countries who are trying to figure out how to transition. And so we all have these different ways where we can operate as the body of Christ. So I love that as kind of the conclusion where you don't just kind of leave and go, okay, wow, that's really crappy. Hopefully somehow it gets fixed. Cause it won't unless we do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I don't think we could end on a better note than that, really. Yeah. Plus, if we do, we'll just be droning on. People will be like, I can't listen to this. It sounds like they're just making up new parts to add to it. It's the time.
I got places to be. Come on.
Places to go, people to see. Well, with that, again, I appreciate engaging with you on this. And I really hope it not only just challenges people, but creates more awareness. Honestly, even just talking about it more. The number of people, when I bring this up, they're like, I had no idea. Right. I had no idea this was even a thing. And I'm like, well, that's a step. That's a step. And then we can continue taking steps. So thanks for chatting about that. And thanks everybody for listening. This was a good one. As it always is. They're always good.
Of course.
All right. So with that, we will see you on the other side.